Hey there everybody, Eric from OUTERLIMITLESS coming at you today with another video. Now today's video, well, out here it is an absolutely beautiful day and I have so many videos that I just wish I could produce. And the one we're gonna do today is actually going to be a blend of two videos that quite frankly should probably be separate, but I'm gonna do them both at the same time. So the product we're gonna look at today is the Work Tuff Gear Kitsune, and this is the Model S. This knife has been in my hands now for a number of days. I've been carrying it around. I've been absolutely wanting to get some good use with this, but I've just kind of held off until I could do it on video. And the other part of the review, well, there are projects that, quite frankly, I just want to get into because they're fun, because I can experiment, but I don't always have the time. So today what we're going to do is we are going to build a rocket stove. Now, I've done a little bit of research. I didn't know too much about them. I've picked up some supplies that are going to let me build this stove, and then we're going to get into some cooking, which will be perfect because in reality, in order to use the stove, well, I'm going to need a knife to process some wood and help me process my food. And this little Kitsune S here is going to be the perfect blade for these chores. And so with that said, I have a whole bunch to do and a whole bunch to show you. And if you're interested in seeing a little bit more about what I'm about to get into, do me a favor, stay tuned. And so yes, the Kitsune S, this one here produced by Work Tuff Gear. Now, the designer of the Kitsune S is Jeremy Boulder Valentine, which quite frankly, I did not have too much experience with his designs. But if you look at Valavian Edge Craft on Instagram, you will see all kinds of amazing models that Jeremy manufactures and handcrafts, including versions of the Kitsune. Now, when I say Kitsune S, that's because this particular model here having this swedge on top. There are other models, so there's the Kitsune S, the Kitsune T, and the Kitsune V right now, each with a slightly different blade profile. But this one here just naturally gravitated towards me, this beautiful black wash finish, which I greatly enjoy from Work Tuff Gear. These knives in SK85, which we've covered in the past. The edge retention and properties of the SK85 are definitely suitable for most tasks and good hard use, so it's a perfect choice for this particular blade. But the overall size here, very cool. And I have to be honest, at first I wasn't sure how this was going to fit in my hands and how much I was going to like it. But after holding this for a while and starting some basic tasks, I can tell you this feels absolutely sweet. And here are my materials and supplies for the rocket stove, very straightforward. So the main body of the rocket stove, I am going to use some bricks. So here, just straight up bricks. Now you can get different sizes, you can get different colors or potentially even materials. Here, just typical concrete bricks, no big deal. And then down below you'll see some larger flat red pavers capable of creating a base for me. And that's the main thing where I want this stove to be, I'm gonna say, a little bit portable, where I could potentially put this in different parts of my yard or move it around depending on what I'm looking to do. Now my neighbors had some of these block here, which I thought would be perfect to help me form a slightly taller chimney. So I will be using these as the top of my stove, as a chimney. And then I also have some mesh. So depending on what I'm trying to do, I have ideas on how I will use this to aid in my advantage, but we'll see how that goes. Now these Kitsune models from Work Tuff Gear do come with a nicely formed Kydex sheath. And they come exactly as you see it here, with an ulti clip mounted on the front. Now I've personally used these ulti clips quite a bit, and I greatly trust them to hold my knife securely. You really only need one. You could potentially put a second one if you really felt extra retention was necessary, but the ulti clip doing very good to keep this nicely in my pocket. And you'll see the retention on this knife is absolutely sweet. So it fits perfectly like all Work Tuff Gear sheaths. They do a great job with their Kydex. It's safe, it's secure, I trust it, it won't come out. So whether or not you want to use this for an inverted carry on, say for example, a pack strap, or you want to carry it upright, for me personally today, this is going to ride nicely in my cargo pockets. It'll give me the ability to have a nice utility blade on me throughout this entire process, throughout the day, and for my cooking tasks. And so for my rocket stove design, I've decided to have 22 bricks. I may or may not use all of them, but 22 for me would be enough. And then here I have my 4 pavers laid out as a base. Now, because of my particular location, I didn't necessarily need these, but I thought it would work out pretty well to gain a little bit of height on the stove in general, give me a little bit of a taller working surface, and we'll get into that later, just by a couple of inches, and just give me a nice platform for the demonstration and to work off of. Now, again, these could be used later on in other parts of the yard where it may not be quite so even, and I may potentially at some point build more of a permanent feature over near my fire pit. So these will come into play, and I have these laid out as my base. And for my particular design, I do need at least 1/2 of a brick. So here, I'm gonna use my rock hammer. I'm gonna score a line. Flipping it over. And there you go. Not perfect, but this piece is fairly straight. If I wanted to, I could use a diamond on an angle grinder and cut this almost perfect, but for today, this will do. So here you can see my first row, very simple, basically leaving a single brick space in the middle. That's why you need the half, and this is going to allow air to blow up and into the rest of the stove. So at this point, what I'm going to do, and this is a little modification to some of the stoves that I've seen, and this is sort of a hybrid, is I'm going to put a piece of mesh in over the top that's going to sit here, and that's going to allow me to feed sticks on top and still have the bottom open for airflow, help fuel my fire. And so now at this point, putting down my piece of screen. Now the first thing I can tell you is some of these edges on the screen are quite sharp. So I am going to take a minute and I'm going to clean this up, because the last thing I want to do is start gouging myself on edges of the screen that are sharp. And again, you can see where this design will differ from some other stoves out there. If you do a little bit of research, you will see a lot of different ideas and opinions on this. But essentially what's going to happen is this is going to go into place nicely. It's going to sandwich the screen. It's going to work very well to sandwich this and pin it down. And the last thing I'm going to do, and I'll probably actually put this brick here, is put my other half piece right in that corner. And so fitting that in nicely, what I end up with is I end up with open airflow through the bottom, and then a place where I can feed my fuel and sticks into the chamber. And the mesh is going to help prevent larger pieces from falling down and hopefully accumulate a nice little tinder bundle down there and get my fire sustained. But at this point, I'll continue to do a circular pattern, fill this in, and then we'll put the rest of the chimney pieces right on the top. And so now looking at this in detail, you'll see I have put the last row on top, minus, again, what I'm going to use as my chimney blocks. Now with the stove established, I do need to start to get to work processing some wood for this fire. And as I mentioned, I am planning on using this Kitsune S for all of the work. Now the first thing you'll see is it does have a heavy black oxide finish, which to me is probably not the best if you intend on using this for food prep. So the very first thing I'm going to do is carefully clean this. I'm going to take it into the house, clean it up real good, get any of the excess black oxide finish off of here, and then we'll take a look at it to see what it looks like. But at this point you can see this Kitsune S is a little bit more gray, not quite as dark as the original coating, but at this point I do feel quite a bit better about food prep. However, this right now is not necessarily about the food prep, but rather getting to some processing of my wood for the fire. So with that, let's get to it. Now, I don't necessarily expect the Kitsune S to do big batoning or heavy-duty processing. I do believe in a two-blade system, so to me this is more of a companion blade, but in this case I do want to test the knife and make sure that this SK85, as I would expect, is capable of doing this work. Now, I am going to do some slightly smaller pieces. I don't need anything significantly large. This to me would be probably the biggest diameter I would ever attempt with a knife of this size, but some of these pieces are going to be a little bit more suitable, and they'll give me exactly what I need to get the rocket stove started. That's gonna be a little stubborn for this small knife. I don't think I want to do that to this, so just get it back out of there. No problem though, that's the thing. And the reason why I went with the S, you end up with that nice unsharpened swedge on the top, good durable, gives it a little bit of strength. I don't have any fear with this SK85 that anything would be a problem. So I'll just take a more manageable bite and nibble this down a little more carefully. Hitting that fairly hard, and that's struggling with this piece, so I'm better off if I move on. A little bit round, a little bit long, but I bet you could do it. Driving down through the wood, it is doing a decent job cracking. It's just a very short blade and I'm not able to get too much leverage on it. And again, that is really not what this is intended for, but hey. So I'll just work on these pieces, get them down to size. And so you'll see for the stove, I am trying to get some fairly small pieces. Now it's going to do two things. It's going to get me down to some very dry wood, which will help me get the fire started, but it also needs to fit inside the chamber. So I can't have stuff that's overly large. That's going to be the one downfall to the rocket stove, is just the size of the fuel, but stuff like this I think will be about perfect. Now I'll be the first one to admit that some of the things I was trying to baton were far too big for this Kitsune S, but there are a couple of good benefits that come from trying. First is you do want to figure out what are the limitations to your knife. So that's the first thing. How much can you get away with? But the second thing, and for me, and that's especially important as a reviewer, is how tough and how durable are these blades. And as somebody who works with a manufacturer, if there are going to be problems, well, we might as well find out so they can adjust their process if needed. But again, with the Kitsune S and the Work Tuff SK85, absolutely no problems, no durability issues whatsoever, neither on the blade nor the scales. Now you can see I was wailing on them fairly heavily, and at this point just some dirt and grime and maybe a little bit of wear marks there, but not a big deal, nothing that won't clean up. And so what I'd like to do now is, with what I have processed, all of this is good in terms of the overall size, yet it's a little bit long. So the next thing for me, I'm just gonna cross baton a little bit through some of these to get them a little bit shorter. And so now that I've cross-batoned through all of this and got it to a more manageable size, I do have some thoughts on the Kitsune's handle. And so I definitely understand that every design is going to have a pro and a con. It's going to have some conflict from time to time. As a designer, you're always trying to find a balance between what works. And what I did find is that after some cross-batoning, because this has an exposed metal tang sticking out of the end, when I was batoning, because my hand tends to fall more towards the back end of the knife, there is quite a bit of metal exposed at the end. And when I was batoning, that did create quite a bit of shock, and it actually kind of hurts a little bit on the underside. Imagine getting whacked over and over and over by a thin metal tang. So to me, and just in my personal feelings, I feel as though this knife would greatly benefit from having the G10 or the type of handle scales, depending on what they choose in the future, to extend beyond the exposed tang and just fill that out completely. I have to admit, I am glad that the handle is this long. It actually fits my hands very well. The overall size is about perfect, and it does feel really good. But I think with a little more material back there, and then just the lanyard hole drilled through both the handle scales and the tang, it would work out a little bit better. And you can see that for me, I did include just a little pinky lanyard, which is nice. Gives you a little additional purchase on the knife if you so choose. And I think this would have worked just fine. So my personal opinion, which of course only goes so far in terms of, thought process, but would be to have the exposed handle slab material going all the way to the end of the knife. And so now that I have some of my fuel ready to go, let's get into carving. So again, for me, I am going to leverage the pinky lanyard and just gain a little extra purchase on the knife. I think that's going to help with some comfort. And here you'll see there is some reasonably aggressive jimping on a thumb ramp. It does index very well, but I can tell you that is just a little bit on the sharp side, but it does feel pretty good. And getting into it here, just going to pick myself a nice run down the wood here. I got a good edge to start with. And finding my edge, well, edge geometry is pretty good, but the angle seems to be maybe just a little bit, I would say, shallow. I might like to see this edge steepened up just a little bit to make it a slightly more slicey knife. But again, you're going to strike the balance between a durable edge and a slicey edge. But I would think for me, most of the time, you would tend to use this for more of your slicing tasks. And I feel like this edge is just a little bit on the shallow side. Not bad though, and definitely getting some nice curls here. But again, I feel like it might just be a little bit broad. And Work Tuff Gear does generally put a convexed edge on most of their blades, and this might work a little better if it had a V grind. It's subtle, but I do think that is a convexed edge. It's hard to say, but I do like this. It feels great in the hand. The jimping is definitely a little bit on the stiff side. In fact, you can see it's leaving prints on my thumb, but not a huge deal. I'd rather it be there than not. And the other place I can tell you is right here. Because that is just a little bit tight, and you can kind of see as I'm gripping, I rely on this spot right there to grip. And because that's narrow, you do bear down quite a bit. So my suggestion is chamfer that out just a little bit, soften that up, and soften up the jimping. Now, if you're a guy that can do these mods on your own, maybe it's better to leave these just a little bit sharp for your liking, and you could sand that and kiss the edge over. I might do that on my own, just to soften this up with some sandpaper, or, just round that out a tiny bit. But again, good to have quality purchase on your knife, and this is doing a fairly good job. And now for scraping, one very nice position in the hand is your ability to roll the knife sideways, get a nice grip with your thumb on the side of the blade. It fits very well, and that should lend itself to some decent scraping tasks. Now you can see here there is some fluff accumulation here. This fuzz, is kind kind of adding up, but adding up slowly. And I do want to say that depending on which one of the profiles you get, it may act differently. So between the S, the T, and the V, each one may act a little bit different. This does feel a little bit squared, but it's not sharp, and that's for sure. I'm going to try the jimping just for this example. Now comparatively, if you look at how the jimping is actually making fuzz, this is doing a really good job. So that just shows you how sharp the jimping really is. I mean, that's, again, to the eye of the beholder, and if you were wearing gloves, this would be absolutely no problem. But this jimping, again, is quite sharp. And now processing down some fat wood. Again, just coming close to getting my rocket stove fired up, and getting some fat wood here is definitely going to help. I can tell you this Kitsune is just nicely blazing through this, no problem. So at times the edge working a little bit better than others, but again, it's going to be nice and durable, having a convex edge and just being a little bit shallow. Getting some nice chunks here, biting deep. Alright, and again, getting that fuzz using the jimping here. It's doing a wonderful job for this. There we go. And so now, the moment of truth. I have everything ready. I have all my wood processed and ready to go. I have my stove ready to go. Now, I have temporarily removed the top block. This to me is going to be the easiest way for me to get this started. I can get my tinder lit and down and into here, and that can start to burn. And then here you'll see, this is where I'm going to continue to feed my fire once I get it going. And once this is all lit, I'll take the block, I'll put it on top, and that'll be the height of my chimney. On this side here, you'll see, nice and open for plenty of ventilation. I have all of my materials prepped, and at this point, I'm going to use the Kitsune S to strike my ferro rod and get this thing lit. So let's see how this goes. This should be fun. Just going to use the jimping here and scrape just a little bit. We'll get some of the material from the ferro rod down here, which should help it spark. Let's try the spine first. The spine is not easy, so now I'm going to use the jimping. Oop, that might be going. That's close. The problem is, I keep smashing my knuckles because there's not a lot of room to work. If I was further out on the blade, I don't think I'd have quite that problem, but you can see I'm smashing my knuckles. I'm going to have to just grip it and rip it, which I don't think necessarily works the best, but if I can land, come on. It's close. There we go. All right, so let's let that get started. You can see already, it does definitely draw straight up through the stove, which is nice. So the airflow doing a wonderful job. You can definitely see the action, and that's without this even really getting started too much. So at this point, I'll let that burn just a little bit, and then we'll get my block on top for the chimney. Now, I kind of wish I caught this on camera, but unfortunately, I didn't. And literally, the split second I tried putting this block on top, it started ripping, just absolutely ripping, and flying out the top and like singeing my hair. And I have plenty of it to singe. But that shows you that the height definitely matters. So it went from like a reasonable sort of mellow fire and flame to now really starting to rocket. And you can see that is just wicking out the top like crazy. Looking down from the top inside, just doing a nice job burning. And I can feed this from the top now or from the side. And as I'm getting an ember bed built up in there, I feel as though I might as well just feed it from the top. And I feel like I can even get away with some slightly longer pieces while I'm getting this established. So just get it in there and get this whole thing up to temperature. Now, something that's pretty important to me when I'm planning on cooking on something, especially like a stove or something like that, I do like to get a good long burn to help sort of, I'd say, and I'm not going to say like sanitize it, but it definitely has impurities, manufacturing process and trucking and hauling and storage and all of that. So for me, getting a good long burn in here is going to be key. Now, I'm not going to be eating for a little while. I got a bunch of food prep to do with that Kitsune. So in the meantime, I'm just going to continue to fuel this and let it burn. But you can see it's doing a wonderful job, and it definitely rockets. So one thing I did find is this rockets so much that you definitely need some sort of a damper. So you'll see I'm using the bricks on the bottom to kind of control the airflow. Now at this point I have the bottom pretty well choked off, as this is doing a good job here. And then on this side you'll see I've partially blocked it, and then I have my fuel just continually feeding in. Now I do need to process some more wood. I'm kind of running out a little bit, but at the same time I can keep sort of shoving it in there, and that should do a pretty good job keeping this up to temperature. So it's a little bit of maintenance. I can tell you that if you're not careful, these are a little bit finicky. These rocket stoves seem to do a good job, but at the same time I'm constantly maintaining it and managing it. So not a big deal. It just comes with the territory. Well, and so at this point, to wrap things up, there's really nothing I enjoy better than experimenting a little bit, getting outside, having a fire, and playing with knives. And on top of that, cooking and having some good food. So today was definitely successful. So first things first is the rocket stove. I'm really happy to have tried that. It's something I've wanted to do for quite a while now, and I finally got the chance. I think it was fairly successful, and it's something I look forward to experimenting further with. I think a rocket stove, there's probably a number of different configurations. The one I went with, I feel like there was almost too much air draw. Now, that maybe is not a bad thing, where you can kind of dial it back when you want. You take the bricks and you place them strategically to cut down on the airflow. Now, that was a big deal for me because otherwise the wood was just burning away almost instantaneously. And that's what I was trying to say. It does take a lot of tending, and I feel as though I ended up needing a little more wood than I quite frankly originally thought. But even at that, it didn't need a ton, and especially once I got it dialed back, it did burn quite well. It did a pretty good job cooking my food, but I did find that the actual jet was very concentrated, so my main cooking area was literally directly in the middle. Now, with a nice wide cast iron skillet, I did have the ability to spread things out as I need, but I did have to move the food around just to get it to cook evenly. And the Kitsune S performed extremely well. Now, I need to take a step back to say that I use knives a very particular way for my needs. You need to take a thought and say, what was the original intended design for a knife? And if you were to talk to Jeremy Boulder Valentine and say, well, what was this originally designed for? He may have something in mind other than firecraft. Now, for me, where I was processing wood and getting into some of the fire prep, it had some challenges, and I uncovered them. I would say that hot spot for 1, this hot spot for 2, the aggressive jimping for 3, and the lack of the, I would say, squared off spine. It led to some funny geometry issues and some hot spots while I was performing my work. But other than that, it definitely did a great job. Now, I was able to perform all the tasks. The quality, definitely there. It's what we've come to expect from Work Tuff Gear. I do greatly enjoy this knife. I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect knife, and I like this quite a bit. And in fact, if I was to do further testing and to get into more of those utility tasks, I know it would perform extremely well. A daily EDC and a fixed blade front pocket carry, doing little things like, basic cutting of cordage and slicing and opening packages, and then my food prep. It's wonderful. So I do greatly enjoy this. In fact, I carry it quite a bit. I'm going to continue to carry this a lot, and I do think it's a good performer. I just found that for some of my testing, it was a little bit limited and just had some minor deficiencies, but not a big deal. And so with that said, it was a 2-for-1 video today looking at the rocket stove and the Kitsune S from Work Tuff Gear. I hope you guys enjoyed what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.